Michael Phillips is leaving the Chicago Tribune. His position as film critic has been eliminated in a restructuring 4 years after the paper, all of the Tribune papers actually, were bought by Alden Global Capital. Venture capital firms like Alden are part of the reason so many newspapers have folded and journalism itself is suffering. But you know what? It's not all of the reason. I think it's just more of a symptom. When Michael first came to Chicago to be the new theater critic, yes, I said theater critic, I interviewed him for Performic. Over the next decade, as he became the film critic, we spoke sporadically, but always deeply, always deeply. So when I heard he was leaving the Trib, I asked if we could do an exit interview. So, Michael, are you sorry to leave the Tribune? You've been there for 24 years. You've been doing this for, you said in your final column 27 years. Are you ready for something new?
Yeah, well, what has it been here? 2002 to 20. It's been 24 years at the Trib, and 20 of those have been on film. Because I came from the LA Times, where I was doing covering theater as the theater critic. Came for the same job in Chicago,
Hmm.
and I've written about two things in my life essentially, both very kind of like specific niches. Theater first, and then film also in my 20s, and it's been a lifesaver in terms of my morale, my head, my curiosity to be able to kind of switch tracks when even material I love in terms of theater, everything from Guys and Dolls to like particularly favorite Shakespeare plays. You get to the fifth or sixth production, no matter how different or whatever it may be, you just start feeling like even the stuff I love is starting to kind of make me grind my teeth at night. So it was time to go back to film. So yeah, no, Carrie, I got a lot to be thankful for, and we'll talk about how that's also attached to a lot of survivor's guilt at this point in this profession. But yeah, I'm sorry to be leaving. The Tribune's been good to me, uh, even this particular way of exiting was, look, I had a choice to stay and wait for a reassignment, and
Right.
I will say that's, I don't think that would have been the case if the guilds for the newspaper guild's first contract, which a lot of us worked on in terms of like the negotiating the first contract, it took 5 years to do it,
Hmm.
and a lot of us just were on and off for a couple of years on that. But I don't think if that language weren't in the contract, there wouldn't have been that. Well, we have to offer all these folks if we're getting rid of their position, or however many. It was just two people, who were affected, I think, this way, where the positions were zeroed out. So therefore, they had to offer a reassignment. And look, that's a decent way to go. Either stay, take a reassignment to be named later, which may or may not be to your liking, who knows, or take the opportunity to try something new and take a wee buyout. And I did. I took the wee buyout.
I love how you say "we buyout." That's really funny. Yeah, actually, that's an interesting point you bring up because it's all in with the other politics stuff that I write about all the time, like neoliberalism and in workers' rights and power. Who has the power? And what you're saying is it because we all know people who have been like given a pink slip one day, and 50 of them have been given the same pink slip, and they're gone,
No, that's
and there's
hideous.
there's nothing else, right? So when workers have power, even when economic times are bad or the company is restructuring or whatever, workers do have some sort of power that helps individuals.
Right. Yeah. And look, first of all, I have to say, Carrie, it's the reason I'm subscribing to your Substack. I mean, because I think the breadth of your political sort of perceptions and just perspective is we need it. So, I mean, now more than ever, but we always did. So, uh, yeah,
Thank you.
no, it's true. Uh, yeah, it was good to have that in the contract. I'm not talking out of school on that. It's in the contract. It's public.
Right.
And so that's a humane way to make a decision to leave. And
Yeah.
many people look. I was around many buyouts at the Tribune. like a lot of newspapers at this point.
Yeah.
You look at 20 full years, and um, we've been in and out of bankruptcy years ago a couple times, and a lot of
Mhm.
different owners, and yeah, it's been a tough century for journalism, and a lot of it was self-inflicted wounds about not figuring out about what's this thing called online, and how do what do we do about the web page, and why do I don't want to deal with it. Do you, Ted? No, no, Mark, I don't want to do it. And it's always Ted and Mark, and they're always white men, and all that. And I wrote about that in the exit column. I thought, look,
Right.
I have skated without being any kind of administrator ever, and I never had any management ambitions. Uh, uh, I have skated along happily with a fair bit of luck. In my sales, just because I came along. I'd love to put in for that job. Hey, great, middle-aged white guy, come on in, And newsrooms were not enough of them were paying attention to just the question of diversifying the ranks to look a little more like the cities they're allegedly serving. Um,
Okay,
so,
so I think about this a lot, actually, because when we talk about diversity, we a lot of stupid people think, oh yeah, we just need to get some brown people in here, right?
well,
Right, like
not
it's
only,
skin
not
color.
only that, not
That's
only that.
right,
Yeah.
right. But for me, it's there's a link between getting different people with different lenses and different points of view into the newsroom and being nimble enough to say, "Oh, whoa, what's this online stuff that's happening here? How do we change for that?" Right? Because if you are already dealing with people who come in with different views of the way you white guy sees something, then you're practiced at being nimble. You're practiced at seeing all of the possibilities. So something comes at the whole newsroom from left field, and you're like, oh, how do we deal with that? This is let's go into our practice.
Right.
We're just dealing with a specific different thing, right? But if
Mhm.
you are set in your ways and you are not challenged, then when an existential challenge comes, you're not going to be ready for it.
Yeah, yeah. A dear friend of mine who lives in Brooklyn is, came out of the University of Minnesota as I did, uh, was in a different realm of media than I was. She was an art director, uh, working for Newsweek back in the '80s, and then this thing came along in the late '80s, maybe 1990. What about should we do? And she was like, we should do this, and we can I'd like to try to figure this out because nobody knows how to do it. And they were like, nah. And she said, well, then I think I'll go take this job over here. And they were saying, no, stay, you can try to figure it out, I guess. And uh, it was a good thing. I mean, Newsweek got a few extra years out because they had a little jump on everybody else. And, well, she worked from, went from Time to, or Newsweek to Time to Martha Stewart to Disney to, and
Mhm.
it was but she was so frustrated at the entirety of the Newsweek masthead, just saying, to hell with this thing. It's just going to fade. And
Right.
you have to be brave enough to think twice about your own first reactions, to as a journalist to like, should we really turn our backs on this thing? Is it a fad? And I think too, we have to mention, Carrie, that there was a time when newsrooms, whether they were weekly magazines or daily newspapers or weeklies, anything, whatever, had enough advertising money to take chances. And now some people took the chances, and some people refused to take the chances,
Right.
and that's tougher now. That is tough now.
Yes, and I experienced that firsthand. I mean, performing started uh, uh, getting into trouble um, around the same time as the recession, but it really wasn't the recession. I mean, it was. It wasn't. It didn't help, but it was Facebook. Suddenly, people could advertise for pennies on the
Exactly.
dollar,
Yep.
and also Facebook did created a community. Now, there are problems with Facebook, right? Performing had an editor. Facebook doesn't necessarily have an editor, and we all know what the problems are. But it does a really good job of creating the community that I created with a theater community in that space.
Right.
And so I was like, oh well, I guess I own a horse and buggy, and we just invented cars. Okay,
Right.
and moved on. But if you are a legacy media outlet, you should have been able to pivot. And I think that the entrenchment of a specific point of view and objectivity, I'm objective, so that means I'm never wrong. That didn't help. That actually caught a lot of newspaper publishers flat-footed.
I agree. I agree. I agree. All
Okay.
of it. Yeah, that word is tricky though, objective, because in the realm of opinion,
Yes.
you have to kind of re-educate. Yeah, it sounds patronizing to say it, but what the hell? You have to reacquaint some of your colleagues with
Hmm.
this notion of what a review, what the latitude on a review is, or a commentary, or an essay, and how what's the difference between that and the a feature, a reported
Hmm.
analysis that with maybe some opinion. It's not just one or the other. And when I hear graduate students at much better schools than I went to use words like, yeah, but you have to be objective when you're talking about like reviewing it. I was like, blah, blah, blah. Hold on. It's informed subjectivity. There's no objectivity in this game. There is not.
No,
Informed
not
subjectivity.
in columns, not in criticism.
Yeah, not in
No.
straight criticism. That's what
Right,
I'm
right.
saying. Yeah, yeah,
Even
yeah.
in straight news, I will argue that you have to know what. Uh, I have talked to people who are like, who have said, I've just casually said, yeah, my black friends when they go into a store, they're followed, right? Or they have, or every single one of my black friends has a story about being followed in a store, right? And then you have this white journalist, white male journalist saying, that doesn't happen to everybody. That can't happen to everybody. Are you saying it happens to everybody? It's just a blanket thing. And I'm like, everybody I know. And and he just doesn't believe me because it's not his point of view. And yet, if you would go, this is part of the problem, right? If you would go to a black person who works in the office and say, "Are you followed every time you go into the store?" That person might not tell them the truth because he's already being obstructionist, right? Because he wants the real story. He's not believing what he's hearing. So that's part of the problem. Like, it's sort of built into us to be cynical and to question everything, but we don't really question ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, and there's a lot of self-censorship going on right now in every newsroom in the country for obvious reasons, because
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lawsuit waiting to happen from the White House, no matter what the hell they do. And I
Yes.
mean, it's true. It's just for sport, and
Yeah.
it's paid off real well. I mean, it's advantage Trump right now. So
It
it's
has.
hard to,
Okay.
you don't ignore that. What's going on? That is part of what's going on in the culture in the country today.
That is part of what's going on. Yeah, that is true. But that's now. I was talking before. But anyway,
Before,
I want to get to something because you just alluded to it. One of the things that you said in your goodbye column was that you referred to gobbling research like the grad student I never was, which totally hit me because I never went to grad school. And I have always thought of journalism as an ongoing grad school. I mean, I
yeah,
am always researching, I am always learning.
yep,
I do know a lot of journalists who don't do that, but that's their problem.
right.
And I also know a lot of people who don't believe that we do that. Right? I think that's part of the issue. We have a really bad rap. But talk about journalism as grad school, as something where you're always learning, always growing, and always teaching.
This is exactly why people put up with unfair underpaid unfair wages, a tough. I've known too many people all over the country who maybe they're young-ish, folks with not just an undergrad degree but maybe a graduate degree, and maybe their folks didn't cover that, and maybe they have loans that are not small, and they are doing Lyft driving while doing
Yeah,
their journalism job. They're walking dogs not for fun. They're whatever they're doing. And uh, again, I was fortunate. I came in at a time when that wasn't the case. Nobody had a second job because they needed to eat. Uh, and wherever I worked, it was like, okay, living wage, and better than average living wage. And I've never been at the top of any newsroom in my life. It's so you just sort of come into the solid middle of your department, and then you tend to get, they leave you alone. You know?
Mhm.
But that's I love the continuing education aspect of this job. No matter if you're just a straight metro reporter, you're covering crime, and that is wearing, heavy work.
Mhm.
Whether it's sports, whether it's these sort of more like team specialty jobs. I hate to use that word because it sounds boutiquey, but if you're like a Bears reporter, if you're a Cubs reporter, if you are a classical music critic, if you are a movie critic, if you're a
Mhm.
theater critic, whatever, these are jobs that are somewhat narrow, and hopefully you've learned enough of the skills along the way to be able to do a much wider range of writing, even if you're not as fully versed in a kind of an involving, continuing way in your
Mhm.
field, but you know enough to say, I don't know yet, but I know how to find out something in 4 hours, and I can write this thing if needed. And that's just you need the humility always to just say, all right, I'm never going to try to write ever above my knowledge, because
Mhm.
the first thing you have to get over your as a young writer working in any media situation or any broadcasting anything is the impulse to sound a certain way or a little more authoritative than you really have in you to back it up. Just be honest, be humble. Just say, if you're especially in an interview situation, you will not learn a thing if you're worried about how you're coming off. It's okay to come off in
Yeah.
a way that I'll tell you one thing. You want to hear? Okay, writer's tip one. We got to get to at least two more, and then we'll have a podcast. Okay,
Okay.
writer's tip one.
Let's
Younger,
tip.
whatever age you are, if you're interviewing somebody and you're looking for not a specific quote from somebody, because that's a bad way to go into any kind of story, even if this person you're talking to at the moment is just a small piece of the story. But you don't look for a specific angle from this person because that's what's in your head. But if you don't know what's going on with certain things, like with me, I am so seriously money challenged and finance stupid, okay, in every
Mhm.
aspect of my life. And when I had to do a financial story about a theater going under or an artistic
Wow.
director resigning in a cloud, this is back, years ago in the
Right.
theater,
Right.
along the theater, the kind of the regional theater circuit. If I got the executive or the managing director on the phone, it was always like, okay, 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 it'll be okay. I'm just my inner monologue. Okay, just ask the questions. You just don't pretend like you know anything because then you're faking it. But if you ask the dumb question, like, well, wait, what's the difference between deficit and debt, which I still don't understand, frankly. But I remember the answer to that one was like this really pissed off, sort of exasperated answer from an ordinarily nice guy, but it was a crisis situation for the organization. But he was like, well, I mean, the difference between da 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 and da 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 is da da da, and we are da 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 da. And that quote, angry, succinct. I sort of inadvertently goaded him into kind of losing his shit for a second. It was like, well, that's now we're talking.
Mhm.
That's the quote I need to explain it to people like me. And so I wouldn't, you don't get that through strategy or anything. You just it's okay to ask like, well, what does that mean? Or, wait, or break it down a little bit for me. Or can you here's the thing, find, can you point to one example that'll make sense to people like me of what you're talking about? And then they're talking, okay, good. They'll play ball unless you're total buttheads. They'll play ball with you with that. So anyway,
So
that's what,
writer's tip number one is don't pretend that you know more than you do.
yeah. And there's a real value in asking a pretty stupid question. Yep.
Truth. Truth, truth, truth. Okay, so really, how much did you know? Not only do you know a lot about film, but you also know a lot about film music. That's one of the things I've noticed over the years. Your film music oeuvre has grown. Did you know that? Did you know a lot about film music before you came into this? Were you just like fascinated with it and delved in? Talk to me
Always
about how.
loved it. Always loved the music. And I mean, this is, nothing, this is everything you already know or anybody knows, but, music has always been a way into my experience and my emotional life in the theater and especially in film. I think from a young age that I didn't analyze it. I didn't understand it. I just was in it if it
Mhm.
worked for me. And then you start maybe asking questions that if you're not a future critic, other people may not pay attention to, like, ugh, I wish this music would shut up, or just like it's unsophisticated but honest responses of like,
Mhm.
or like, God, that's gorgeous. I wonder what instrument that is, or
Mhm.
that's yeah, I love it, and it's been a gas working at classical WFMT here,
Mhm.
which we do, every week they do a show called Soundtrack, which is about film music, also television, some theater. I'm sneaking it in there, and it's hosted by one of the staff people, but I do the first 10 minutes, and sheepishly, I have to say, I own up to this. I love this because it's uh, exploiting uh, exploiting my complete lack of actual musical knowledge, um, uh, and I'm inflicting my taste on the public.
Mhm.
I've always loved doing that, and I'm learning a little bit more every week, every month, working with a great producer, Weston Williams, just about, okay, this is how he describes it. He would describe it this way, this composer, that, or and I don't adopt, again, I don't adopt those phrases or that phraseology to describe what I'm doing in the intro. Um, but I because that would not sound like me, and I would be talking above my actual knowledge base. But uh, I love what it can do, and I love this whole prospect of figuring out how to describe and set up the right example of this music that we all love, because it's we all know on subconscious level the music we see in movies we love, or
Mhm.
the music we
Here.
hear is really a beautiful collaboration between what we're hearing the composer um, say about what's going on between these two characters, or at this moment. Maybe it's not being spoken. It's just great. I love it. So that, again, I have no earthly reason to be hired to be doing this. I don't have but I don't know. I mean, I can fake like I sound. The voice is reasonably comfortable on radio, and that's kind of helped me get that far. But no, I love it. I love it. Don't you? I mean, film
Yes.
music is, yeah, it's
Yes.
fantastic. I
Yes.
mean,
It's
and
also I can also tell, like, a bad TV show. My father will watch bad old TV, and the tip off that he's watching bad old TV is the music, right? Because the music is doing a lot of work to get your emotions and to get you scared or whatever, and it
yep,
drives me crazy.
yeah,
Um,
that's
but
great.
anyway, I want to switch to talking about the state of the industry, which we talked about a little bit before. But you said that the film critic job was eliminated. The theater critic job is not going to be eliminated, right? Chris Jones is still there.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Chris
Okay.
Jones, just to state the range of work he does at the Tribune. He's the theater critic, and we were both hired back in 2002 as sort of a double act. Back in the
I remember.
days when a guy like Richard Christensen, who was a longtime Chicago theater critic and editor, and also I think the section editor for a long time, he left. He worked 9 nights a week. I mean, I don't know how he did it, and it definitely was a two-person job. So that, again, two middle-aged white guys walk in, we'll take it. So there was that another chance for diversity blown, but we did it, and I'm grateful for it. But Jones is the theater critic now, and he is also the editorial page editor of the Tribune, and he also
Oh,
covers many other things: opera, dance. He's also the theater critic for the New York Daily News. So a
okay, good.
busy man, a busy man.
Diverse. He's a very, very busy man. There's a story about Richard Christensen that he actually told at an event that I hosted once. That it was middle winter. It was a snowstorm. I believe there was an opening at Northlight Theater, or no, it wasn't Northlight. It was Marriott, and the freeways, such as they were closed, and this man went up um, Milwaukee Avenue, like I'm pretty sure it was Milwaukee, the entire way
Out to the suburbs.
north in a snowstorm. It took him like 2.5 hours to get there, but he
He made
got
it. He
there.
made it.
Right.
Right. I mean,
That's
that's
Richard.
that's the greatest. That's classic Richard. I mean, he
Yep,
loved, he devoted and dogged, and also
yep.
wide open in terms of what's this town up to? What are these people capable of? Very.
So one of the reasons that I think there are some theater people in Chicago who are probably unhappy that Chris is not leaving. Just saying that. I love Chris, but there are people who love to hate the Tribune theater critic, right? And one of the things that they say is that they're not the bigger critics aren't coming to the smaller shows, and they use Richard as an example because Richard was like, "Hey, I'm going to see this show that this small theater troupe Steppenwolf is doing over on Clark Street." And it was Bomb and Gilead, and it made Steppenwolf, right? Like those were the days where critics had that kind of power. My answer to them is look, there's a readership of the Tribune, there's a readership of the legacy papers. It's not necessarily the readership that's going to come to your little theater, and media has changed right now, right?
Yep. Yep.
So, like I want to make clear, I think Chris is doing a good job, but I hear a lot from the masses, right, about how they don't like the fact that he ignores them. But that's a question of how media has diversified, how legacy papers don't necessarily have the same impact that they did when Richard was there. Talk to me about that because this has spanned both of our careers.
Yeah. I haven't. It's funny. I haven't. I mean, I think about Richard all the time, uh, uh, and he was a real, I guess, it's sort of a champion, for me to a champion of me to kind of come in and consider the Chicago job. And um, he worked like nobody else. I mean, he worked more than anybody else. As people have told the story time and again, the Chicago theater scene came together and coalesced and hardened in the best possible way because of this relentless constant attention he was paying to what was
Mhm,
going on, and as you say, to companies. The great thing about Chicago, Kerry, is even now times are tough everywhere. Everywhere it is very hard for everybody. From the tip of the iceberg and the biggest budgets to the smallest storefronts to kind of recapture even a healthy fraction of what they were doing before 2020. It's
mhm.
very hard, but um, and I knew that clause was going to be too long for me to remember what the hell I was saying before. So there it was.
Okay. Richard was there every week.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
People
yeah.
don't like the legacy papers because
Right.
small
Okay, got
theaters
it.
don't like legacy
Yeah, I
papers.
got
Yeah,
it. So he is out, literally out 8 nights a week, 9 nights a week. He's actually ahead of the calendar.
right.
Uh, uh, a big, beautiful theater city can only happen the first time. There's no
Yeah.
second time. I mean, maybe it will happen in some unexpected, wholly different direction. Uh, Nobody would say no to that, but it it just doesn't. There's one rise, the first rise is it, and it's very hard for people to kind of live with that feeling. I think that how can you what happened? What happened to our pal Richard? And he helped make us. What is it? I know. I tuned out as much as I could because I can't write straight if I pay too much attention to the feedback. But those first 3-4 years I was here doing theater, I'm sure people were having mild heart attacks. I mean, it took one negative review of a major Steppenwolf show that for, so I know the brass came over and had a talk with then
Oh,
editor Henry Lipinski. And it's like, I don't think he understands our mission, which is code for, this guy's never going to cheer up, is he? But in fact, yes, again, objectively, uh, maybe not as um, uh, consistently generous a critic as Christensen, a man I loved, and a good writer, but my own temperament may be different, my tastes a little different. I hope the one thing I had in common with Richard as a writer is that we both were wide open to anything, any
Mhm,
type,
mhm,
and
mhm.
but again, yeah, the big jobs come with a lot of scrutiny, and it's, you got to be able to, you got to be an adult about saying, look, I may feel for 10 seconds like I'm sticking my neck out by expressing what will be an unpopular opinion that may not sell tickets the way that theater wants it to, but they're the ones sticking their necks out every time they commit to the next show, and it's just not. You have had your say. They deserve to have any kind of say they want about your work. You, I don't care. I just don't buy that we, some critics are just, in other cities I've worked, the thinnest skinned people on the planet, and I don't think that does not
No,
do the practice of criticism any favors.
no, no. Right, right. I very much, and I also think that some theater practitioners are thin-skinned, but also they're desperate, and the the entire industry for both journalism and arts has changed, right? Like here we are doing an interview 2,000 miles apart from each other through Boomcaster, right? And it's going to go on YouTube and it's going to go on Substack, and those things didn't exist when the
Hmm.
first time I met you, right? None of that existed. Well, Las Vegas and Chicago existed, but um, it was even hard to do a phone interview and record in those days, right?
Right, right.
And I sat last night and watched a series all night last night, right? I did not go to the theater. I did not go to any of the shows. My daughter was like, "Hey, I got tickets for a show on Sunday. You want to come with me?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess." I
Oh, okay.
spent
So
my
you feel it too. You feel the sort
right,
of the
right. I spent my life in the first half of my life in theaters. It was my religion, right? Like it was my temple. I would walk into a theater and sit down
yeah,
and feel at home. Um, and so there's that diffusion that has hit the live entertainment industry,
right,
and specifically theaters that are doing written stuff, right? Rather than in Las Vegas, there's a lot of entertainment,
right.
shows. Um, but it's also hit the journalism industry. So that brings me to like my main point, which is, do we need film and theater critics anymore?
That's a good question. It's a big one. I think we do. I think we do, and I think uh, I don't know what it's going to take for some of the media organizations who have kind of backed away from that in favor of funding other things in the newsroom. That's always the argument. Well, in order to,
Mm, mm,
in order to take care of these needs over here, we have to look hard at, okay, what's really important. What do we consider crucial, and the most important stuff. And I do not envy these decisions that have to be made every
mhm,
quarter. For any number of newspapers or organizations, it's hard. Um, I think that media organizations, particularly daily papers, diminish opinion in every kind. Political columnists, city columnists, all of that, critics, all of it. They diminish it at a kind of a stealth peril. You don't really know what you've missing until people start thinking, I could use somebody to help explain this to me, or
mhm,
tie it in a little. Like this, they have half formed thoughts as a reader, as we all do. Like this is sort of like this other thing. Yeah, okay, well, now I got to feed the dog. But the right column, even if it's one of three or four that columnist wrote that week, or that critic reviewed that week, um, can do that kind of job that is not lecturing to anybody, or handing down a court decision on on the previous night's show or any of that.
right,
It's better than that. And I think opinion is really really a precarious section of most newsrooms right now. And again, I'm not looking at any one paper. I'm looking at most papers out there,
Mhm.
and it's hard. It's very hard. I do think we need them, and I think that only because that's all I've done in my life for money, and I didn't do it for money. And I'm not gonna, I have to work another, look, as I said, I'm terrible with money, so I have to work another 6, 7 years to hopefully 10. And hopefully it'll be something that won't repeat exactly what I've done. I am not one of these guys who wants to like, zing into a Substack right away. I don't want to continue doing a lot of what I've just done for 20 years. I want to
Okay.
do something else.
That's interesting. So, because I was just going to bring up Substack because that's where a lot of the criticism and opinion is going, but it's not necessarily for money, right? Like
Yeah.
we're all now entrepreneurs. I've been an entrepreneur my entire life, but we're all like entrepreneurs who are really trying to get people to come and look at our opinion. One of the things that Substack does, which I find annoying, is they're like, you can look at these stats and then adjust your writing to what your audience wants to see. And I'm like, no, like no, that's not
Talk
how it
about
works.
they're taking the exact wrong lesson from what a lot of legacy media companies are leaning on a little bit, you know.
Mhm.
And I will say, again, the reason I don't feel anything but gratitude in the long run for where I've worked most recently and what I've done the previous 20 years, I've spent 40 plus years in this stuff, is I never ever got into a situation with any editor or any paper, no matter how broke, how difficult the situation was, how many bankruptcies were in the recent past, whatever. I never got in a situation where they were like, don't cover that. Nobody's going to read that. Or, there's
Or
whatever,
we're gonna piss off a donor, which
right.
which I
Whatever
run into.
back and forth or editing sort of like tangles I've had with somebody, that's that's journalism talking, not fear of, as you say, donors or advertisers. That's a different thing. And uh, to have felt, that essentially trusted, to not waste people's time or, this and that. Look, I will admit to one thing, and that the political times in just look at the last 8 months, let's
Yeah.
say, it has been very difficult to go through your mind at the keyboard if you're writing about any politically driven movie or issue or whatever that would make sense for me to write about. It's very hard to uh, uh, write it in a way that does not provoke the broken record. He's a broken record on the subject, but you have to be your own best critic before you hit send. You have to look at it and say, is this, am I whining? Am I hectoring? Am I
Right.
repeating myself? It's all that stuff. And I'm fairly self-critical by nature. So I hope it's helped, you know,
So so two things that you just brought something else up. One thing really quickly in terms of repeating yourself. I am re-examining that. I look at people like Robert Reich, who puts out like four things every day and repeats himself, and he's just like using different words, right?
right,
And
right.
Robert Reich has broken through because of that, right? Um, and that's how Trump and that whole crowd has broken through. They repeat the same thing, even if it's a lie. They just repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, and then it becomes real to people. So I'm rethinking that whole repeating yourself thing. Like I want to be interested in what I'm writing, so I don't want to write the same thing. But and my head says you just wrote about that a few months ago, but also what I'm learning is, not everybody saw it a few months ago, and they need to be
Right.
tapped again, and what have you. Um, but what were you saying about the? Oh, there was.
Well, the other thing, let me just tell you one thing, and it'll come back, I bet. The key for me, and this is writing tip number two. Okay. In these
Got to have proof.
situations, Yeah,
Godfrey.
no, one more coming. One more coming. We'll get that. Writing tip number two. Remember, you got the bludgeon. You also have the rapier, the thin blade. The bludgeon,
Nice.
it tends to in print or and or online, the an essay or a commentary or a review. If you just, oh, I hate it, I hate it, or oh, this guy's a evil, whatever, bam, bam, bludgeon. It's little like you're a prize fighter and ding, round one, and you come out just like swinging like a maniac, and you got 9 more rounds to go, and you're going to exhaust your reader if that's your attack, which is just kind of
Hmm.
this relentless flurry of whatever, and you're trying to get by basically on sort of manic energy in prose, and that's just exhausting, I think. And the rapier, just kind of just pick your shot, maybe two or three, but remember that you always have to just, nobody, uh, people who are going to be suspicious of your angle because maybe they don't vote the way you do, or they don't, they will hang in there longer if
Hmm.
you are simply uh, making a case based on some evidence, and you pick the right examples that are pretty hard to argue with in your point of view as the writer, and that
Hmm.
makes it, more calmly persuasive. I'm not saying right like you're some sort of dispassionate professor, but it's just pick your shots and build it on evidence, and then you know it's like you're building to kind of an inevitable reaction or conclusion or interpretation that comes maybe once, twice, maybe three times, not eight with the bludgeon. So bludgeon versus rapier, typically use the rapier.
I totally agree with that. I'm not saying that you repeat yourself within the one column, but I'm saying that I'm learning. It's a very hard
Yeah,
thing for me to learn the value of of taking something that you wrote a few years ago, or not a few years ago, a few months ago,
right.
and turning that same theme into another column. Most of the people who read won't even know that it's the same theme that they wrote, that they read a couple of months ago, because I've written it differently, right?
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
um, that's kind of like what I'm learning at this point. I remember what I was going to ask you though. Um, Film, I had approached you at one point to do a podcast on how film influences our culture, how
Mm-hmm.
pop culture influences who we are and what we think, and I think it has a tremendous influence. So, in the '60s, we were seeing films that were very counterculture, right? In the '60s, in the '70s, um, I wasn't seeing those films, but I was aware of them in the '70s,
I was seeing
and
them.
right. um, but but and in the last 10, 20 years, we've been seeing a lot of um, army films, a lot of war films, hero films, right? And a lot of our television, all of the all the police procedurals that we have are very much victim and hero, and the hero is generally the white guy, except for CSI, where the hero is now the white woman, right? But
Progress.
what progress? Yay,
Progress.
good for Mariska Hargitay. Uh, but how have you seen the connection between what you're seeing on screen
Right,
and
right.
what is happening in the world? How are they
Yeah.
feeding each other?
Yeah, it's a good point. It's very hard to when you're living it, and you're living in. I swear to God, everybody thinks every phase of American history or any history is sort of equally chaotic and momentous. I deny that completely. I defy anybody to look at the last 9 months or the last 6 years as emblematic of much else. That I mean, it's
Right.
just like the crystallization of some of the worst traits of the country and all that. That's my feeling about it. But
Mhm.
it's hard when you're in it. I mean, it's like I always say it's a little like looking at the Seurat painting Sunday in the
Mm.
park, if you're standing 3 inches away. That pointillism doesn't quite make sense.
Right.
Yeah, it's not meant to be looked at that close. So you back up, you start seeing what's up. it's very hard to do that in the moment, and this moment is lasting forever. So it's very
Mhm.
hard, to keep your sanity as a writer on this subject, even if you're only occasionally directly intersecting, say, film with politics. But I'll tell you, Kerry, if you think the last 10 years have been sort of militaristic and maybe just sort of you're seeing more of that now, I think we're really about to see an aggressive administration placating wave of work like that coming out because it'll keep attention from the White House off their backs and out of their pockets. And um, I don't know if mass culture really exists anymore in the way that the '60s and the
Uh,
'70s could actually change people's minds about some stuff. Where you look at, I mean, they always bring this example up, but when was Will and Grace? Was that in the '90s?
yeah, it
I
was
can't
in the
remember.
90s.
Yeah, '90s. So I mean, Will and Grace had a fairly strong, pretty clear, undeniable impact about like, okay, how mainstream can we get gay and lesbian acceptance?
Mhm.
Uh, whether that show was great or just good, it accomplished something. All in the Family, 20 years earlier, accomplished something. Norman Lear
That's
accomplished something.
absolutely.
Uh, and it happened with all kinds of things. And it's odd because I haven't watched, I do not have the time or the bandwidth to have watched enough television or streaming work uh, to see what kind or network stuff, either way, to see where the retrenchment or where the maybe the breadth of it is narrowed a bit or maybe gotten a little more toward the right. But I do know that I can shout out a colleague, Nina Metz, who's been my close screens colleague these last few years, and she will continue in. I'm not exactly sure what the job description is, but she'll continue writing in the entertainment section, writing arts news locally, and also paying attention to television and streaming issues. And she is really good, always has been, at looking at things like you mentioned, just this sort of weird wave of what's now called propaganda shows,
Yes.
where it's just kind of an unquestioning baseline, presentation of law enforcement that we'll start there and then maybe have a couple of bad apples, every other episode, and that's comfortable for almost every viewer that might skew center or right of center, but
Mhm.
everything else seems, like propaganda or, progressive, BS to these people. But it's at the same time, this is a great time for these last few years has been really wonderful for the TV and streaming because all the nervousness and timidity in the Hollywood studio system, trying to figure out if they even believe in feature films in theaters anymore.
Mm,
The pressure's comparatively been off on the creatives putting together the best TV and streaming we're seeing. It's true. It just is.
that is true.
Um, so it's not, I mean, and there's so damn much nobody can keep up with it, which is another reason why we can use a few honest, opinionated brokers that we personally like reading, helping us through the pile of stuff. Because I mean, do you know anybody who says right now, actually the streaming options seem about right to me. I can keep up. I can keep up with it all.
Do you wanna
Nobody.
know, you wanna see my list of stuff that I have to write I have to watch, that I want to watch, that I've
Yeah.
been wanting to watch for years? Like, I've got them by years, and 2022 is still pretty much empty right now. So, I appreciate this, Michael Phillips. I know you have other things on your plate, but I would love to know where you land, and I would love to, keep in touch.
We'll see,
Um,
man.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I'd love to come back on because obviously we hit about 17 subjects and we never, did we
Yeah.
get to the writing tip number 3? I got it.
There you go.
Ready? Can I go out with that at least?
You
All
can go
right.
out with that.
Everything in life is more interesting than a plot summary. So don't spend, if you're writing about anything that has a story, like a theater, film, whatever, uh, uh, don't waste more acreage on just grinding through the plot. And if you ever write a paragraph that begins with the words, the plot revolves around, I would take a day off and just rethink that phrasing. And it's just, you have to sneak in just enough sense of what the story's about in the plot to not frustrate a reader. But you've got everything else in the world to write about in that review. Both in what is actually on the screen or on the stage, or what is the strong and provocative connection in that work to the world around us right now. That's the stuff you should write about. Don't overdo the plot summary, because everything in life is more interesting than that.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Have a
Let's talk
good
again.
Saturday. Yeah, we will talk again.
Thanks, Gary.